Hey everybody, it's Jenna. In the 1970s, comic writer Mark Gruenwald had a theory. If you're not familiar, Gruenwald was a writer, editor, and occasional artist responsible for iconic runs on books like Captain America, Quasar, and Squadron Supreme. He loved superhero comics so much that he literally had his ashes mixed in with them upon his death in 1996. And he really loved the potential of the comics continuity, of everything being a massive text that could react to each other instead of just inconsequential standalone issues. As an editor at Marvel, he cared about it so much that it inspired another mustachioed, continuity-focused character, Loki's Mobius M. Mobius. His theory was about continuity, but was also about something so much bigger. It suggested that superhero comics, which at that point were a somewhat confusing mess across publishers, reboots, Earths, and sliding timescales, actually existed in a massive omniverse. Defined by him as, quote, the sum total of all universes, and later, the space-time matrix that comprises all alternate realms of reality, it meant that any worlds you could think of, fictional or literal, could theoretically bump elbows with each other. It didn't matter how expansive each individual world was on its own, or whether or not these crossovers would break existing continuity. It was just that the possibility and potential of them was so much fun. Gruenwald published his theory in a 2-issue fanzine of the same name, and it largely sat under the radar among diehard comic nerds for years. But in the years since, he has been proven right. In the comics, which continue to defy expectations and cross over with each other, something I made a video about earlier this year but never could have imagined would get to the point it is now, but also in other media, and especially in Fortnite. Sure, it started out as a cartoonish battle royale, but it has since become a pop culture melting pot unlike anything that we have really seen. And I think that, in the process, it has become one of the most comic booky video games to ever exist. Not just because of the frequent collabs with Marvel, DC, and other superhero universes, but because of the way they work in the game itself. It all began with Thanos, something that has accidentally become a trend in my videos lately. In the summer of 2018, right around the release of Avengers Infinity War, Fortnite debuted a limited-time game mode where players could race to wield the gauntlet and literally become Thanos. A year later, around the release of Endgame, another game mode was introduced, which I still miss to this day, where fans could equip the gadgets of various Avengers and chase after Thanos and the Chitauri. The idea actually came to fruition thanks to the Russo brothers, who had been playing the game in between editing Infinity War and soon started the conversations with Epic Games' Donald Mustard. As Mustard said at the time, quote, "It was really important that whatever we did, it had to be super authentic to both Fortnite and Avengers Infinity War, and something that fans of both would be excited about. It was not only authentic, but absurdly successful, and it was soon followed by limited-time themes around Batman, Catwoman, Deadpool, and Aquaman. But the doors really blew open with Nexus War, the first entirely themed Marvel season in August of 2020. Instead of the Battle Pass just having one superhero surrounded by a bunch of original Fortnite characters, it was now entirely Marvel. And even if you didn't buy the Battle Pass, you still became absorbed in Fortnite's take on the Marvel Universe, with key locations and gadgets making their way onto the map. The whole thing culminated in a season-ending event, which I still think is one of Fortnite's best, where everyone banded together to stop Galactus from eating the island. Ever since Nexus War, you haven't really been able to go a season of Fortnite without the introduction of a new Marvel and/or DC character, either through the Battle Pass or the item shop. If I attempted to sit here and list all of them, I would A, be here for an hour, B, probably have to edit them scrolling by like a TV infomercial. A second fully Marvel season, Absolute Doom, arrived in August of 2024, and this past summer's superhero-themed season heavily featured Superman, the Fortress of Solitude, and inexplicably Tim Drake. This partnership even extended out of the game and into officially licensed crossover comics, with Batman Fortnite Zero Point in 2021 and Fortnite Marvel Zero War in 2022. I have been actively playing Fortnite for an embarrassing number of hours since around 2018, and I have witnessed this avalanche of superhero collabs in real time. They haven't always been perfect. For starters, I feel like certain character skins would be better off not being behind a $30 paywall or inexplicably rotoscoped. And I can understand the argument that the game is getting a little too bloated, not just in the literal gameplay, but in the countless other collaborations with fictional universes, real-world pop stars and celebrities, and YouTube brain rot. Hell, Epic is so aware of this that there are literally multiple game modes trying to get things as back to basics as humanly possible. But I feel like Fortnite, even at its biggest and most ridiculous, has become something to behold. And that something is incredibly comic booky. Even at its most fundamental level, I see such an overlap between the mechanics of the game and the mechanics of reading a sequential superhero comic. Both allow you to hop into a world that is fully realized but still brimming with potential. That world has a relatively low barrier to entry, although you can go nuts and spend a ton of money if you want to collect everything. You can dedicate your entire life to absorbing the lore on a daily basis, or you can just pop back in whenever a big event piques your curiosity. You can also completely miss important lore buried in a random chapter. You meet a colorful cast of characters who are able to change but will still always have the same definable traits, and every single one of them is somebody's favorite character. You can become enamored with some of them and ignore or avoid others, unless you have to interact with them when they tie into something important. You can also occasionally and inexplicably run into a real-life celebrity. Your entire adventure has a relatively relatively predictable beginning, middle, and end, but can still go into places that are far beyond your expectations. And no one can ever really die, in part because the story will always keep going, and because there are countless reboots and resets at someone's disposal. It's a never-ending, always evolving fictional world that you can engage with in a number of different ways. It is serialized storytelling in its purest form, in part because Fortnite has a surprising amount of restraint in how that story is told. There aren't trucks of new plastic merchandise pumped out for each new season, any theme park tie-ins are few and far between, even as Disney now has a major stake in Epic Games, and the idea of a standalone comic, movie, or animated series still feels impossible at this point. But none of that really matters, and if anything, it has only proved that, just like reading a comic, nothing will replicate or replace the experience of actually booting up the game itself. Once you fold in the game's years worth of superhero characters, it just works on a fundamental level. The character designs fit Fortnite's cartoonish house style while still allowing for a lot of flair. They also very rarely speak out loud, meaning that you can develop your own reading voice for them just like you would reading a comic. And just like in an average comic book, the combat in a round of Fortnite is intense and flashy, but still tones down its violence and has a sense of whimsy. This is especially the case for these superhero-specific combat options, whether that's throwing a batarang, or fighting with Wolverine's claws, or swinging around the Daily Bugle, or calling on Crypto to absolutely annihilate your opponent. And when the superhero elements make their way onto the island, they are so lovingly put together that you can't help but be in awe, whether you are a diehard fan or a relatively new one. The Galactus event in particular was just so good that it literally inspired how the character was brought to life in the Fantastic Four First Steps. Honestly, the level of incredibly specific Easter eggs in the recent Simpsons season make me eager to have another all Marvel or an all DC season, because the attention to detail could just be on a whole other level. To Mustard's point from earlier, it is all just super authentic to what the characters can and should be, without ever losing the heart of the game itself. That approach not only draws in the existing superhero fans, but brings in new ones as well. Fortnite is no stranger to accidentally shaping how its younger players engage with pop culture, but with Marvel and DC in particular, that has led to something impressive. Players might know of the Marvel and DC universes, but they might not know a certain character until they spot them or play as them in something like Fortnite. It's gotten to the point where some have wondered if characters are intentionally chosen for Fortnite to help build up their fandom before they're eventually in a movie or TV show, but at least in the case of Tim Drake, that seems to not be the case. And then there are the tie-in comics. When Batman Fortnite Zero Point first launched in 2021, it sold like hotcakes. Part of that was by design because each issue contained a code for an in-game item, and collecting all 6 issues gave you a new Batman skin. Part of that was also by accident because some shop owners woefully underestimated just how popular Fortnite was and did not order enough copies. But either way, it turned the act of physically going to a comic book store and picking up a monthly issue of a comic into a genuine event, especially for the younger Fortnite audience that might not have ever done that before. And if even a fraction of them liked what they read and decided to dive into comics from there, then it was more than worth it. I will forever bang the drum that the current generation of kids deserve to have ownership over these characters. Sometimes they are given that, and sometimes they're handed the reheated leftovers of the previous generations. Franchises that hit their peak when they were toddlers, or sequels to comic events that happened before they were even born, are only going to do so much to bring them into the fandom and actually keep them there. We're starting to see the tide turn for the better, both in some comics and in movies like Spider-Verse, The Batman, and Superman. But I honestly think Fortnite has helped a lot too, in a way that a lot of other superhero games have not. In the world of superhero video games, this past decade has been filled with a lot of failed stops and starts, with millions of dollars being thrown at games that either fizzle out pretty soon after their release or don't even make it beyond the initial announcement trailer. And while I know that there will always be an avenue for triple or quadruple A video games that present superheroes with an epic story and unflinching realism, that format can sell the superhero short. I think it's telling that some of the biggest successes of the past decade have been the Spider-Man games and Marvel rivals. Games that are also, quote, super authentic to their characters and worlds, but have a massive amount of freedom to their gameplay. Just like there are dozens of different strategies for how to play Fortnite, you can play Spider-Man by just ignoring the quests and swinging aimlessly throughout New York, or win a round of rivals by spamming the same silly ability over and over again. I've had an early version of this script sitting on my computer for about 6 months now, and I never really felt like I could crack it. That is until the game's recent 0-hour event, which ended the Simpsons season and reset the map before Chapter 7. It brought together nearly every single collab character that Fortnite has had recently, throwing them into a massive, monumental battle against the island's newest evil monster. Did it feel like the game had finally fully gone into Ready Player One territory? A little bit, but it was also an omniverse in the kind of fun, limitless way that Grunwald had envisioned in the 70s. I mean, come on, there's David Cornsweat's Superman in the same frame as Iron Man, Godzilla, Invincible, and the Ninja Turtles. As much as it felt like something that had seemed like a total pipe dream decades ago, it also felt like something that has become very recognizable to comic readers. It gave me the same emotional high that I felt reading the finales of Crisis and Secret Wars and countless other event comics. Once we get through this massive, intense, occasionally unhinged fight, brighter days will be ahead. The world will reboot and look a little different, but there will still always be so much left to explore. I will forever be in awe of Fortnite's ability to capture that feeling and make it seem cool, not just through the characters, but through their format of sequential storytelling. Do you play Fortnite? Has this video convinced you to play Fortnite? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends if you haven't already done so. As always, you can find me on social media, especially on Threads at Hey It's Jenna Lynn. Merch is available at the link in the description, including this mug that I've been drinking out of the entire video. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, go read some comics.